Can everyone hear me? Yeah. I would like to sincerely welcome you all to the Hammer Theater. My name is Trevin Smith. I'm a journalism major here at San Jose State University, and I would like to sincerely welcome you all to this very special event.
Hello everyone, my name is Elizabeth. I am a senior at San Jose State University studying journalism and minoring in political science. Mr. Acosta, take a seat.
Well, thank you. Thanks, guys.
Can we get an applause for Jim?
Working? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Can we hear him, Ryan?
Yes.
Perfect. Great.
So thank you so much for being able to join us here today for San Jose State. We have a lot of San Jose State students in the audience today. So how are you doing, and can you tell us how your colleagues are doing in CNN?
They're doing fine. I guess all of you saw what happened yesterday. They found a bomb at our New York City headquarters. I actually found out about it when I was taking off from D.C. to come out here, and then I'm watching CNN on the airplane, and then all of a sudden, our staff is having to evacuate the building. People were very worried and freaked out, I think, a little bit initially, but then I think over time, people sort of started to realize that, okay, this attack was intended to intimidate us and bully us, and we're not going to let that happen. So I think we're doing okay.
Thank you again for being with us. So
Absolutely, of course.
Is it really, like, having a bomb threat, a domestic terrorist attack, something like that, like, what did that feel like being away from your colleagues? Like, you obviously must have been thinking about them the whole ride over.
Yeah, well, I wanted to get to work, and so we were, all working our sources, and most of the news was happening in New York City, outside the Time Warner building, and so I knew that I couldn't be there on the scene. My colleagues would do that, but I could still email sources and so on, and I was able to get some information last night before I went to bed, as a matter of fact, about some of the packages and where they were going, and even got some pictures, some photos that we were able to get through a law enforcement source that showed one of the pictures to George Soros and one of the packages to Obama. And so it was good. I felt good that I was able to contribute in a small way to the overall cause of trying to shed some light as to what happened. But I also, I think it underlines what we're up against right now. We're up against a very real threat to journalists all over this country, and it's something that I've been keenly aware of for some time now. Having covered Trump during the campaign, when he would call us the disgusting news media, the dishonest news media, and liars and scum and thieves, and he actually used those words, and the crowds would chant CNN sucks, and we'd have people coming up to the press cage and flip us off and call us traitors and so on. To me, what we saw yesterday was the consequence of that kind of rhetoric being ratcheted up to that sort of level. If the rhetoric aimed at the media is going to be cranked up to a level where people think it's okay to take matters into their own hands and come after us, then I think we've got a very dangerous environment for the press in this country. And there's some folks that are around my age in this audience, a little older than you guys. We just don't remember anything like this ever happening in our lifetime, seeing journalists being threatened in this country in this way. And so it's a little scary, but as I said earlier, I think we're becoming more determined than ever to keep fighting for the truth.
So you mentioned that Trump attacks the media a lot, specifically you as well. So given what happened yesterday, and we do have a lot of journalism students in the audience today, what do you think it's Trump's responsibility, that he holds some sort of responsibility for what's going on today?
Well, first of all, we have to be very clear that he did not order somebody to put bombs, at CNN and send bombs to these people around the country. But I do think a tone is set at the top. And if the president is going to call us the enemy of the people and those sorts of things, he should understand that words have consequences. I've been told by a number of people who work closely with the president that, hey, Jim, you shouldn't take this so seriously. It's just an act. It's sort of like on his TV show, you're fired, you're fake news. It's the same kind of thing. Not everybody is in on the act. Not everybody understands that he's just doing a shtick from The Apprentice. And when he calls us the enemy of the people, there are some people out there who may not be flying with a full deck. And they may not understand that, Trump's just trying to, work us over. And they may think, okay, well, if the press, Jim Acosta of CNN, if they're the enemy of the American people, then they're my enemy too, and I should go after them. And that's the kind of environment that we're worried about. So I do think there is some responsibility that he should take in all of this. And you'll recall last night, I don't know if you saw this, at his rally in Wisconsin, he condemned violence and so on, but he went after the media again and said that we're somehow to blame for all of this. I have never called anybody the enemy of the people. I've never done that. Neither have any of my colleagues. He's the one that has done that. And I think that, to not take any responsibility, and he took no responsibility last night, to me, it was just unpresidential.
So I know one thing we really wanted to talk with you about was your experience at college in Virginia. You were an undergrad just like so many of us here, and you were a communications major, I understand. Your father was an immigrant from Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
What's that like covering immigration in the Trump era as the tip of the spear, CNN chief White House correspondent, and having those roots in your family? What is that like crossing your upbringing with your job?
Well, there aren't a lot of folks who are in my position who come from an immigrant experience. My dad is a Cuban immigrant, came over in 1962, 3 weeks before the Cuban Missile Crisis, and grew up in this country. At first, he couldn't speak any English. I call him one of the original dreamers, because he came over before a lot of Latino immigrants came over in this country. And he tells a story about how, his school teacher growing up in grade school, took the time of pulling him out of class and making a special case out of him and helping him learn English, learning how to read, learning how to write. He had a compassionate teacher who believed in that sort of thing. And when they moved from Cuba, they didn't have any coats or sweaters. It had been cold before. It's sort of sunny and warm down there in Cuba. So they needed coats and sweaters for the cold weather. There's a local Presbyterian church in Vienna, Virginia, Fairfax County, where I grew up in Virginia, outside of D.C., that provided my dad and my grandmother with all of these coats and warm clothes and so on. And that was the kind of environment that they came into. That was, of course, there were some people, it was Virginia. And there are some people who were racist and so on, I'm sure, and treated my dad and my grandmother in an unkind way. But that's not the story that he tells. The story he tells is about how welcoming the community was when he came into the United States. And to me, that is how we should be today. That's how we should be towards immigrants today. People shouldn't be told that Mexican immigrants are rapists and criminals and so on. And personally, people are like, hey, Jim, why are you injecting your opinion in all this? That's not my opinion. My saying that it's wrong to call people rapists and criminals, that's just being a good American, in my view. I think that's just the way things should be. That's just being a good human being. You should treat other human beings with respect and compassion. And especially if they're coming in from another country, like these migrants are coming up from Central America and so on, they're trying to escape violence in their home countries. They're trying to seek a better life. I think we do a whole lot better for ourselves as a country if we try to put ourselves in the shoes of some of these immigrants. Obviously, we can't open up the borders and let everybody come in. Whoever wants to come in, come in. We can't do that. We have to have laws and so on. But I think a tone has to be set at the top that's a healthy one. Otherwise, you're going to have half the country hating immigrants, and that is not the American way. That's not the country I grew up in. And that's why the Statue of Liberty talks about giving us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. That's the American tradition, and it's the tradition that Republicans and Democrats have always stood for over the years. It's all come to a screeching halt in the last couple of years. Just because one president comes in and says we're going to demonize immigrants doesn't mean everybody else has to go along with it.
Yeah. Given that you are Cuban and that you have a direct access to the president and that your last name is Acosta and that you're Latino, do you feel that you are a sense of representation to the Latino community, or as a journalist, are you just doing your job, not really knowing that people do look up to you, that you do come from an immigrant background?
Well, I can't go in there every day and ask a question about immigration. I can't do that because there are lots of other things going on. He tells falsehoods all day long, and so part of what we do is we just, we try to fact check and tell the truth about what's happening at the White House. Once a week, there's some sort of major crisis happening that we have to cover, the Supreme Court nomination, so forth and so on. But I do think, yes, because of my background, because of my upbringing, I do feel that I do have a certain responsibility to make sure that those questions are asked. And so when Stephen Miller, the domestic policy advisor, came out in the White House briefing room in August of last year and was talking about how they not only want to shut down the borders and build a wall, but they want to try to reduce legal immigration, not illegal, legal immigration by 50%. By having some merit program where if you speak English, you get this many points, and if you have an Olympic medal, you get that many points, you have a PhD, you get this many points, and so on. I challenged Stephen, and I quoted him the Statue of Liberty, and I said, listen, not everybody who comes into this country can speak English. They can learn how to speak English when they get here. They might be really, really smart people, they just haven't learned the English language yet. And, part of the reason why I asked the question in that way is because of the story that my family has, the background, the heritage that I have that I'm proud of. And I wanted to be able to remind him that, this is a diverse country. And, he's just coming in the year 2017, 2018, and trying to change things, throw things upside down. Okay, that's fine. You can try to do that. You're the president, you're the White House, you're the domestic policy advisor, you can try to do those things. But, it doesn't mean that we're not going to ask hard questions about it. Like, that's our job. Our job is to try to get to the bottom of not only what they're doing and what their policies are going to be, but what the motivations are behind those policies. So yeah, I do feel a certain responsibility to ask those questions.
I saw that interview, and Stephen Miller was continually trying to shut you down, shut you up, and obviously you've made a name for yourself in the White House press corps as the guy who will be there and who will do that. Why you? Why not the others? Why not more? Because I hear so many students ask me that. Why don't they just get up and storm out of there?
Yeah.
Explain to us why.
Those are all good questions. I've heard that. Yeah, and I have colleagues like April Ryan. She asks very tough, pointed questions. Cecilia Vega with ABC. Peter Alexander, who's with NBC, who asks really good questions. There's a bunch of them. Folks with the New York Times, Washington Post. We have a lot of great reporters who sit towards the back of the room with foreign press outlets. And outlets that maybe you haven't heard so much about. All of these smart people ask really good questions. I don't think we should all just, maybe we should. Maybe one day we should all get up and walk out. Maybe. But I do think the briefings serve a purpose, although they've kind of gone away lately. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yeah.
She does a whole lot less of them. They've been kind of going away lately, but they do serve a purpose. And I put it this way, it's not always the way they answer a question, it's sometimes how they try to avoid a question.
Exactly.
And try to give you a non-answer. Sometimes the non-answers say more than the actual answers, because people are smart people. They understand, like, oh, so-and-so asked that question, they didn't want to answer that. I wonder why that is. I better start paying more attention to that. So I think it all serves a purpose. There was one day where I did get up and walk out, and people may or may not remember that, but I asked Sarah Sanders, the press secretary, a couple of months ago, what is this thing with the president calling us the enemy of the people? Will you stand there and tell us that we're not the enemy of the people? And she refused to do it. She wouldn't do it. And at the end of that, I was like, all right, I'm out of here. And I got up and I walked out. And I thought, you know what, listen, if you're going to sit there and say we're the enemy of the people, I don't have to sit here anymore and take this. I'm going to get out of here. So who knows, maybe one day we will all get up and walk out. See what they do then.
So we were kind of talking backstage that a lot of reporters who are Latino, who do come from Telemundo, who are the White House correspondents, who come from Univision, they don't get called on.
Right.
And there's also not a lot of minorities who are White House correspondents.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think they do not get called on?
They don't get called on, I think, in part because they don't want to take those questions. They don't want to answer a lot of questions about children being taken away from their parents at the border. That's a difficult thing to defend if you have a soul. If you have a heart and a mind. Anybody with half a brain and a heart and a soul knows, I have to say this to a bunch of students, that taking a child away from their mother and putting them in a cage is wrong. It's just wrong. And it's just wrong. I don't know how, I don't get how they think they can get away with that stuff. And I think that, there was one exchange that I had with Sarah one day where, Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, one day said, well, it's in the Bible that you have to follow the law. And I said to Sarah, I said, where is it in the Bible that says it's okay to take, kids away from their parents? Where is that in the Bible? And she and I went back and forth, and she said something along the lines of, well, you must have a tough time understanding short sentences or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's when I know you got them. When they're resorting, I should say, to insults, that's when you know that they don't have any good answers.
You're sort of touching on that now, but how has the atmosphere in the White House press corps changed since the Obama administration?
Yeah.
Among yourselves as reporters?
Well, I mean, there were days with the Obama White House, and I covered the second term, where you would get into it with them. I mean, you would definitely hear from them, and I heard from Jay Carney and Josh Earnest, the two previous press secretaries, when they would see stories that they didn't like. One day, Dennis McDonough, the chief of staff, he called me Kim Jong-un, because I guess he didn't like what I was doing one day. He goes, oh, there's Kim Jong-un. I was like, I'm not Korean, I don't look like him. I think I'm in pretty good shape. But anyway, we got to do it. We mixed it up with them too. But Barack Obama, and I tell people, like, I was tough on the Obama people and the right-wing people on social media, like, oh, what a joke, you're ridiculous, how can you say you're just as tough on Obama as Donald Trump? Guys, that's apples and oranges. Like, Obama did not call us the enemy of the people. He just didn't do that. You know what I mean? So there is a difference, and it's a different landscape now, and things have changed. When the president demonizes the press, listen, it's no picnic. There are lots of various things going on at that point. One is, if you are a mainstream journalist, mainstream reporter, by and large, the White House folks don't want to talk to you. They can just go to Fox News, they can go to conservative news media, they can go to their echo chamber, they can feed information to those guys, and they'll let it reverberate and hear how wonderful they are, and let all that wash over them, and they can insulate themselves from any kind of criticism. I mean, I suppose that's their prerogative. If they want to do that, that's fine. But we, in the mainstream press, have a job to do, and that is we have to continue to try to get stories and scoops and hold them accountable and tell the truth. But it becomes more difficult when they're not talking to you as much. The other thing is that our work is under attack on a daily basis by conservative media. Fox News, for a good stretch of this past summer, was going after me. There were segments on Hannity, Jim Acosta, Unhinged, and so on. And what that would do is it would reverberate in my social media accounts. Sean Hannity would do a segment, and I'd go on my Instagram account, and I would find all these comments in my Instagram account. Some were death threats. Some were saying terrible things about me. I'm a human being. I think I got pretty tough skin. I grew up in Washington. I've worked in this environment for some time. I can let some things roll off. But it does take a toll. It does have an impact. I hesitate to say that because I don't want people to flood my media account with even more garbage because they think it's going to work, because it's not. But it does create a hostility in the environment that makes it more difficult to do what you have to do. On top of that, you may encounter colleagues and competitors in the press corps who, they may not necessarily like the fact that you're doing what you're doing. The Washington Post did a story, is he grandstanding, is he showboating? Yeah. There's all of that. I look at it as I'm trying to stand up for the truth. I'm trying to stand up for the First Amendment. I'm not taking policy positions on various political issues. CNN would not let me do that. But I can take a stand on not being called the enemy of the people. And I think, when they're lying to you constantly and they're not answering your questions, you have to be aggressive. If they're not calling on you at press conferences, you got to think of something else to do. You might have to shout a question on an Easter egg roll. I did that one time, and they got really mad about that. And the Trump 2020 campaign manager went on Twitter and said we should revoke Jim Acosta's press credentials because I asked about DACA at Easter egg roll. Like, well, he's not answering my questions. So I got to ask it somewhere, and so I was out at the Easter egg roll and I shouted a question about it. My colleagues were welcome to do the same.
So I'm going to change the conversation a little bit because we do have a lot of students here who are
I'm talking too
college.
long.
No. Who I think some are high school, I see some young faces. So at your university, James Madison, what did they teach you as an individual? What did you take from it that you now apply as a journalist?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, honestly, I had a great experience when I was at James Madison. I can't say enough great things about that experience. I had a lot of great professors who, were very nurturing, very forgiving of mistakes. I had a radio show where I had a guest on one time who used the F word, and I was like, oh, they're never gonna let me on the radio again. And they let me on the radio again. I didn't say it, it was somebody that I had on, a fellow college student. I was like, well, I'm not gonna have him on anymore. But it was like a place where, you could, and you guys know this because you're in this environment now where you can make mistakes and, you can kind of get feedback from professors who were like, you know what, that wasn't your best work. I guess it was sort of, more than anything else, it was that nurturing environment that I had there that helped me develop, some of the early skills that I needed as a journalist. And then after I left school, working in various, media markets, I worked in Tennessee, and then I went to Texas and Chicago. You sort of, that is your graduate program, as I like to put it, in journalism. Some people can't get their graduate degree in journalism, I'm not putting that down, but my experience was to do it in local news, where you can make mistakes here and there, and you can learn from things that you did that could have been better, and so on. I think as journalists we have to be very forgiving of one another, and I realize sometimes, that might not have been the best lead sentence to your story. Maybe it could have been a little sharper, or it could have been worded a little bit differently. Or that question at that press conference, you really didn't ask the right question there. You had a chance and you didn't ask the right question. That's one of the unique things about journalism to me, is that we're sort of a community of people who all care about the same thing, which is getting at the truth, and we all have these different ideas as to how to do it, and that exchange back and forth, I think, is a great dynamic for what we do.
People talk about so much how people outside the media say that journalism's dead and there's no future for it, and of course we feel that here at SJSU with the journalism program. We talk a lot about how writing people's interests makes money in media. Should we teach that in journalism schools?
Teach writing
towards people's political interests. Do you feel like that could be the future?
Well, I hope not. I hope that's not the future, because there's an audience for that now. People are now in their own silos of information. They can set up their Twitter accounts and their Facebook accounts and all their social media accounts, and I won't even get into Reddit. I don't quite understand it. That's a whole other rabbit hole. But you can really just sort of cocoon yourself in whatever you think. And my goodness, I'm so glad that when I was coming up in the business, and I see this lady nodding her head right here, because you and I know this, we were about the same age, went through the same thing. You have to have alternative points of view. You need to be exposed to alternative points of view, especially in your younger years, to sort of figure out who you are. If you think you got it all figured out, I don't have it all figured out. I'm still learning new stuff all the time. If you think you've got it all figured out right now, you're kidding yourself. And I think that there really needs to be a commitment to doing mainstream journalism. I hate to use that expression because it's such, I guess it's a loaded term for some people, but the establishment press, or whatever you want to call it. But if you're going to just go write for right-wing websites or left-wing websites, I do think that you are kind of closing yourself off from a whole world of ideas out there, and you may be, shortchanging yourself in the long run. So no, I would definitely recommend journalists. And listen, there are certainly there are outlets like Vox and Vice that are doing great things on the left, and there's outlets on the right that are doing great things. I sort of get a little exhausted from them these days, but the National Review, they write good stuff. So you can intellectually expand your horizons, I suppose, in those areas. But to be a journalist, I think you have to be committed to trying to do things straight down the middle, being fair, being objective, being accurate. All of those things you learn from being in a mainstream establishment news environment where you have editors who are like, no, this is not right. You're not being fair with this story. The way you wrote this was slanted one way or the other, or these things were inaccurate. You know, if you're working for a publication or a website or wherever that agrees with your point of view, your editors there might not be so antsy when it comes to getting the details right. You know, because as long as you've got that point of view there, they may not ride you as much in terms of getting things exactly accurate. Whereas at CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, major local news outlets and so on, there's a real commitment to getting things right and getting things accurate. And so I definitely think people should, to the best of their ability, if they can, make a good living at it, try to go down that road.
So I'll ask a question. Some students were able to submit their own questions.
Yeah.
So I'll ask, I believe it's Sophia Gamble. So what made you interested in journalism? And out of all the stories that you have covered, which one inspired you the most?
Oh goodness. I would say that what got me interested in journalism is when I was in grade school. Now I'm really going to date myself. You guys are going to be like, so old. But when I was in grade school, I got to see the hostages come home from Iran in 1981. And the Washington Post, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but they sent a reporter with my school class as we went out to the streets of D.C. to see the hostages come home. And there's a quote in there for me saying, "Oh my gosh, I was on ABC and NBC." You know, kind of embarrassing to read it now, but I guess I caught the news bug at that point because I was like in the middle of this big, huge historic moment. I think that right then and there is when I sort of got interested in the news business. And when I was in high school, I was on the high school newspaper, and we had these rock and roll murals all over the walls of our high school. And we had like Pink Floyd and Billy Idol and stuff like that. And all these bands that you don't know anything about. You're like, what's rock and roll? Either. I'm just kidding. And one day the Pink Floyd mural was gone. And we were like, whoa, what happened to the Pink Floyd mural? And it's funny that I should mention this now, but somebody put up a mural of the Statue of Liberty, which we should all be in favor of. It's a wonderful thing. But at the time, you're a kid in high school, you're like, hey, what happened to the Pink Floyd mural? And so our high school newspaper assigned me to get to the bottom of it. And I was like an investigative reporter. I was going around talking to students, and some of my friends were like, oh my God, this is terrible. And I had all these great quotes from the students. Went to the principal, he's like, well, we respect everybody's right, blah, blah, blah. I gave like this political answer. And eventually I found out it was the French teacher who had the mural taken down and put up with the Statue of Liberty because, France gave us the Statue of Liberty.
I'm picturing like a student, Jim Acosta, like on the street, scouring the campus, like,
yelling at professors, teachers, and principals, and so on. Yeah, I was a little out of control then too, but
So are we.
I was able to. Yes, that's a good thing. But I was able to get to the bottom of it, and it ended up being a good story. So I think I caught the bug then. In terms of what's most inspired me, when I was able to go back to Cuba in 2016 with Barack Obama, when he met with Raul Castro, that was really cool. And I know I'm in a slightly progressive, campus and whatnot, but Cubans have a different view of the Castros and socialism in Cuba and so on. My dad had to flee Cuba, and they don't have democratic rights and freedoms down there, and they do lock people up. They do, if you are a protester, they'll take you up off the street and they'll put you in jail. And one of the things that I was happy to do when I was there is I was able to ask Raul Castro a question about human rights and political prisoners and say, hey, why, and I did it in Spanish, by the way, too. I did it in Spanish and English. My Spanish was terrible. My English was not that great either, but my Spanish was not that great. What's that?
Can we get an example?
You want me to say it right now?
Or a little bit?
Okay, ustedes tienen presos políticos.
Prisioneros?
Prisioneros.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
No, I said prisioneros, as a matter of fact, in the question, and then later they were like, no, it's supposed to be presos. I don't know why.
Oh, pesos? Okay.
But I said prisioneros, and I was like, well,
But they understood.
they understood it, yeah.
there you go.
And Raul Castro took these headphones off, the translation headphones off, and he was like, what's going on here? He had never had a journalist ask him a question like that before. And he says, well, we have no political prisoners here. Show me a list of the political prisoners we have in this country. And I remember one of Obama's top people, Ben Rhodes, turned around and handed me his BlackBerry, and his BlackBerry said on there, it said, well, at least you tried. Obama Obama had this look on his face like, damn. He's like, way to go. But it was, that was an amazing experience to be the son of a Cuban immigrant and able to go back there and ask a question of, a dictator who does not respect human rights. That's one of the scary things that I see about right now is, people aren't free to say what they want in Cuba. They're not able to write what they want and publish what they want in Cuba. My goodness, do we want to get to a point in this country where we can't do that here? And that is part of what motivates me, is to get out there and be like, no, we're not backing down, you guys. We're going to keep doing this.
I have a question from a student that is very similar to what we're talking about. They asked, why is Trump getting different treatment from the media? Why can he say what he says and face no consequences for it?
Why does he face no consequences for saying whatever he wants?
Yes.
I think he does. Well, we'll find out if there are going to be consequences, aren't we, in a couple of weeks here?
Yeah.
Steve Bannon said that this is Trump's first re-election coming up in a couple of weeks with the midterms. We'll find out if there are consequences. I firmly believe that you can't get away with the things that you've gotten away with without any consequences. I think that when you demonize the press and you demonize immigrants and you tell falsehoods all day long, that eventually at some point, that catches up with you. No, it's not immediate, and no, Jim Acosta is not going to, get justice for you every day on a daily basis, and so you can feel good at night that, I got the better of Donald Trump that day or whatever. My job as a reporter, I'm doing the best that I can. We're all doing the best as we can as journalists. But I would not at this point resign yourself to the fact that, oh, he's just going to get away with all this and that this is how life is going to be. This country has a way of surprising even the biggest cynics, and try to have a little faith. I think it's all going to work itself out.
I've been waiting for a while to ask this, and I skipped this over breakfast because I wanted to say it
Yes.
here.
Oh, okay.
How do you define truth?
How do you define truth? Well, our founding fathers talked about self-evident truths. Self-evident truths are what you can see and what you can hear and what you can discern using your own mind. And most right-thinking, smart people using those same faculties can also discern what is real, what is not real, and so on. And, as a group of individuals, we can all agree, for example, that Donald Trump did not have the biggest inauguration crowd in history on January 20th. Like, there are photographs that were taken from the sky that showed Barack Obama's inauguration crowd here and Donald Trump's inauguration crowd here. So that is something I'm using my own eyes, I'm using my brain, I'm using the faculties that I was born with. And I can discern what the truth is. The truth, and it's apparent in those photographs. Donald Trump did not have an inauguration crowd size as large as Barack Obama's. The grass is green, the sky is blue, 2 + 2 = 4. I don't know how philosophical you want to get. I'm not Socrates here, but I do think that this whole notion of, well, the truth is a moving target. I heard that once from a Trump advisor. The truth is a moving target. And the other day, I don't know if you saw this in the Oval Office, I was with Trump and I asked him, I said, well, where are you getting this from, these Middle Easterners in the caravan? If you haven't seen it, you should go on YouTube and find it. I said, well, do you guys have any proof of that? And he goes, there's no proof of anything. And I'm sort of like, okay, well, there's a banner for the Trump administration, alternative facts. Rudy Giuliani recently said truth isn't truth. Now he's saying there's no proof of anything. If people are telling you that there are alternative facts and truth isn't truth, and there's no proof of anything, I think you probably can, bet the farm that those folks are, by and large, not telling you the truth. And that is money you can put in the bank. And my sense of it is that don't let them try to work us to the point and wear us down to the point where we're like in a hall of mirrors or we're in a corn maze and we don't know what the truth is because we're on our social media accounts and you got people on the left and the right trying to beat into us what their points of view. You have a brain. You have eyes, you have ears, you know what self-evident truths are, you know, and have confidence in the fact that most of your fellow Americans are all going to come to many of these same conclusions. Not everybody is going to, unfortunately, we are starting to live in a quote-unquote, quote, post-truth world because of that, because we're in these information silos and cocoons and so on. But I have faith that for the most part, most of the people in the middle, a lot of people on the left, and a lot of people, even on the right, yes, can all agree on what the truth is. I still have confidence in that.
Speaking to our journalism students, why should they pursue journalism? And for those who are thinking that maybe journalism isn't for them, because it is really hard,
Yeah.
why should they pursue it, and what are the long-term impacts for those who kind of quit and think, this isn't for me, it's way too hard? What's the long-term impact for that?
Well, I think you're going to figure out sooner or later if this is the right business for you. I mean, I used to tell students all the time, don't go into this business. You know, you're going to lose your weekends, you're going to lose your holidays, you're not going to be...
You won't sleep.
You're going to be at some small market in Kentucky on Christmas, and you're going to be like, I miss my parents. You know, my mom's not making, you know, the turkey or whatever. And, you know, it's not easy. And you may get assigned to stories like you might have to go cover that car crash on the interstate in your first local market, where there are dead people on the side of the road, and you're having to do a story on it, and there are relatives coming up to you saying, why are you taking pictures of this? This is my family. Yeah. And so on. And these are real things that happen to journalists all the time. You know, I've covered a lot of my share of crime, you know, inner city crime over the years, where you're showing up at a home where people have been shot and killed, and their relatives crying, and you know, or going to hurricanes. I was at Hurricane Katrina, and you know, I saw just devastation everywhere. And you know, you have to decide for yourself whether or not that's in you, whether you have that emotional bandwidth to deal with all that, because a lot of what we're dealing with on a daily basis in covering the news is pretty highly emotionally charged issues and events. And that takes a toll, that drains you, that might make you a little more irritable with friends and relatives and loved ones and so on, and all those things kind of contribute to making this a tough line of work. But as I like to tell people, you know, doctors work long hours, lawyers work long hours, accountants, their life sucks right around tax time, you know, like, no, we don't all have it so bad here in journalism. But what I tell people right now, and I used to say, don't go into this business, now I say, please come into this business because we need reinforcements. Yeah. We need some fresh legs coming in there, some fresh minds, dare I say some woke kids. Is that okay? Which is like the greatest thing that's come along in a long time. It's a great thing. You know, you guys are sort of on the cusp of, you know, maybe the reason why you guys are all witnessing this right now is so you can say, man, we definitely don't want to do that anymore. And a couple years from now, 4 years from now, whatever it is. And you got a chance to experience sort of the end of, you know, what were some tough times in this country. And then maybe you guys are going to be ushering in a new era where, you know, like woke America, you know, maybe things will just be a little bit more, you know, more enlightened in that sense. And that'll be a good thing. Because, you know, listen, what's happening right now is not easy. It's tough. I get that. People are worried. People are scared. They don't like seeing kids being pulled away from their parents. They don't like hearing the president call us the enemy of the people, or bombs being placed at CNN and sent to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and so on. And you're sort of like, what the hell's going on with this world? What is it? But we need journalists to help sort it all out. You know, so you guys got to help me out here. I can't do it all myself.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
Could you take me to the Trump rallies? Like, we're lucky enough that everyone here is like happy to see us and is enjoying being here. But what is it like facing a wall of people who are screaming, you know, anti-Jim constantly, flipping you off? You were talking about the crazy T-shirts they wear. Take us for a walk in your shoes through that.
Yeah, there's a guy, one of the Trump rallies recently, he came up to me, he's like, hey, look at this T-shirt. There's a picture of Donald Trump peeing on a CNN logo. And I said to the guy, I said, well, yeah, I got a T-shirt of me peeing on that T-shirt. And he thought that was funny. And sometimes you kind of have to mix it up with these guys. Listen, there have been a couple of rallies that have gotten way out of hand. people screaming at us. There was a rally in Montana last week where Trump praised the congressman in Montana for body slamming that reporter. And at that moment, I mean, the crowd was just going wild. And I'll talk about this later tonight. And the guy sort of there's a guy in the audience who made a threatening gesture at me, which I'll talk about later tonight. And it's like, well, what's happening to this country? How is it that we've gotten to this point where people think that's okay? But what I've told people is that a lot of this is ginned up in conservative media. And I don't mean to come down on conservative folks. I don't put everybody in the same category, but a lot of conservative news outlets, they're running us down at CNN so much, and a lot of these people are just watching and reading that stuff in their information silos and their information cocoons, that they're coming in there and they're like, whoa, there's Jim, I'm going to go after him. And that is a big reason why we're seeing so much of that.
But they're not all the same.
They're not all the same. No, I've had people come up to me and say, thank you for what you do. I don't think you're the enemy of the people. I had one guy at a rally in Columbia, South Carolina, come up to me and say, hey, can you, any of you guys have a chair? My mother needs to sit down. I said, here's my chair. And he was very kind. He was very kind about it. He was very thankful. He came up to me and he goes, that really means a lot. You know, you're not as bad as they say you are. And he said the other thing that he said that was interesting. He goes, I didn't realize that you knew the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem.
Imagine that.
He says, I saw you singing the national anthem and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. He goes, I thought that was interesting. He's like, yeah, I'm an American. In elementary school, I said the Pledge of Allegiance every day. So I know it by heart.
They also
You can ask me to do that. I can do it.
They also ask for selfies.
They also ask for selfies. They do that too. It's like they'll give you the middle finger and they'll say, hey, can I get a selfie? And it's like, what's happening here? You know, some of it is like, it's almost like a pro wrestling event like environment where they see the bad guy coming in and like, oh, they want to boo the bad guy coming in. And then Trump comes in, he's like Hulk Hogan or, you know, professional wrestler, and they want to cheer for him. There's a little bit of that environment. The problem is that not every individual person in there is, like I said earlier, is in on the act. And there are some people who think that this is real. You know, I've seen several people, some of these rallies, they won't pay attention to Trump. They'll just leer at me the whole time during a rally. They'll just stare at me the whole time in a very menacing way. And I'm like, you have got to take this down a couple of notches. You know, get to know me. You know, we're not all that bad. And so some of this is sort of like a brainwashing because they've been exposed to what is, you know, sort of modern day propaganda, and it's unfortunate. And my hope is that over time, you know, we'll be able to help break them out of that cocoon, out of that corn maze.
What can students, you know, before journalism students now better prepare themselves for that environment you're encountering out there in the field?
I think you just have to go in there eyes wide open. You know, you have to you know, understand that you're going into a different environment than I went into as a journalist. You know, we got called the liberal media and, you know, stuff like that back then, but it wasn't like this. This is a very different environment that you're going into, and reporting on the news in the Bay Area, California, and so on, where there's a lot of progressive folks and woke folks and whatnot. You know, I can use that word. You know, there are a lot of folks who are like you and intellectually and so on, and so, you know, it may not be that charged, but if you go outside of this comfort zone and you go into, you know, the Midwest or the South, deep South, you know, as a journalist, you may be greeted in a completely different way, and you just have to expect that.
What is the hardest sacrifice you've had to make to get to where you're at with CNN?
The biggest sacrifice I've had to make is just not really having any control over my personal life. You know, that is tough. You know, when you got to go, you got to go. During the campaigns, you're on the road for a long time. I have 2 kids. You know, they would love to see me more often than they do.
Yeah.
I would love to see them more often than I do. I miss baseball games and dance recitals. There was a dance recital I tried to get to one time for my daughter, and I'm like driving like a madman through traffic, and I got there and it was at the very end, and I missed it. you know, and she came out and she's like, Dad, you missed it, you know, and
That's hard.
that's tough. And we have there's an old CNN anchor named Bernard Shaw who used to work for us many years ago, and he put a Facebook post up one day and said, you know, people have asked me, would I do it all over again? And he said, no, he wouldn't do it all over again. He said, I sacrificed too much. I gave up too much of my personal life. And so people have to know that it's a sacrifice. You're making a sacrifice.
So, can you walk us through what's it like being in the White House, being in the press room?
Mhm.
What is that atmosphere like? What do you see? Talk about the chaos, because we're not there, but what is it like being in the White House?
Yeah.
I just want to know what Sarah Sanders is like.
She's like,
She's not that, you know, once it's
Off
off
camera.
right? Like she's,
I came up to her one day and I said, hey, Sarah, I see you got, you know, tossed out of a restaurant. Let's go get something to eat sometime. She said, oh, don't worry about it. I get to go out all the time, not with you. That wasn't even in front of the cameras. That was off camera.
ouch.
So I hate to break it to you, but unfortunately, it's gotten so bad that it's pretty personal privately too. And they think we are the enemy of the people. They do. And I wish it, you know, I wish it were a pro wrestling act for them in that regard, but I don't think it is. I think that it's gotten so charged and they feel so wounded and they feel so mistreated and treated badly, not really taking responsibility for what they've done. They just see what we're saying and what we're reporting in response to what they're doing. That they have gotten to this point where, you know, they just don't see us as being on their level and somebody that they can be friendly with.
And of course, we've seen violence against journalists spiking in this country and around the world.
Yesterday.
Of course. What was the mood like in the press corps the day after the Capitol Gazette shooting in Maryland?
That was bad. I mean, you know, listen, this is what we've been worried about all along. We're worried that the atmosphere was getting too emotional, too charged, too volatile, that at some point people were just going to start coming after reporters. And now I think it's starting to happen. I think this is going to be the new normal for a little while, until we get to a breaking point and a paradigm shift, and we all sort of come to grips with the fact that journalists are not the enemy of the people and that they are public servants and they're just trying to do their jobs. Until that happens, I think we're stuck in this environment where I think there are going to be more threats, more acts of violence. I think unlike yesterday, what happened with the bombing attempts, I think you will see a situation where somebody is going to get hurt at some point. I just think that that's going to happen. And after what happened with the Capitol Gazette, I tried to ask Trump, will you stop calling us the enemy of the people? He didn't either hear my question or just chose not to answer it. But I got ripped to shreds in conservative media. They took that and made fun of it, mocked it, like, oh, Jim, trying to ask questions, you know, hashtag go away or hashtag walk away or whatever they say on social media. I'm not walking away.
Is there something that...
Hashtag screw that.
As the next generation of journalists, we're, a lot of us college students, we're about to enter that field. Is there something that we can do to change that? And if so, what do you...
Yeah, no, you just have to keep doing your jobs. You have to keep doing your work, keep doing your jobs, keep coming to your job every day as a professional journalist who's committed to telling the truth. You know, I guess I get accused of having a little too much attitude or whatever, but my attitude is, hey, don't mess with us. Don't mess with us. Leave it, you know, let us do our jobs. If you think I'm being a little too aggressive, you tone it down, you know? And I think that, you know, I think that it's okay to go into it with that attitude. Now, you can't be throwing your elbows around all the time. Your colleagues are going to really hate your guts, and your bosses might not like it either. But I do think you have to go into this with that mindset of like, hey, you are well within your rights to do your job under the Constitution, under the Bill of Rights, under the First Amendment. You are well within your rights to do your job in this country. And until that document is changed, you know, they can call us all the names in the world. You know, you still get to do your job and be a journalist.
When is the right time to kind of like snap back?
Yeah.
Is there a right time? Because we're taught to be composed,
You have to be
Yes.
composed, yeah,
Of course.
absolutely.
but we're getting attacked
Yeah.
and we're getting called all these names.
I think that, and I tried to do this the other day when I was with him in the Oval Office. I tried to be very calm, very composed. Wasn't yelling or anything, because I was staying 3 or 4 feet away from him. And my thought was, if I'm handling myself in a very cool, calm, and collected and composed way, and he's over here saying all this stuff that sounds a little off, to put it mildly, the viewers at home will be able to say, okay, there's Jim, he's just asking questions, he's calm, he's cool, he's collected, and the president over here is saying, yes, there are Middle Easterners in the caravan, but I can't prove it. Now, if I'm acting like, if I'm a little too revved up and I'm shouting and I'm being too aggressive, that is certainly going to come across and it's going to turn the viewer off, and there are going to be viewers out there who are going to say, well, yeah, what Trump said over here isn't that great, but, what was up with Jim? You know what I mean? That's where you have to be concerned about making yourself the story, and, I get accused of that, like, oh, you're making yourself the story, Jim, blah, blah, blah. I try to go into these situations on a daily basis thinking, okay, I don't want to do that because I want to be able to hold these people accountable. I don't want them to be able to distract the folks at home, especially on their side, by saying, oh, well, there goes Jim again.
During my research for this, I just was flooded with anti-Jim memes of like, he's fake news, Jim's fake news and stuff. So how has real fake news, we all are fully aware of what real fake news is, I hope in this world, how has real fake news affected your job?
Well, 2 things. One is, keep in mind that a lot of that activity that you're seeing on social media, they could be bots. This could be automated messaging, computer programmers whose job it is, whose role in life is to intimidate us and present this false cascade of negative attacks on social media, so people get the impression like, oh gosh, look how popular Jim is. There are 50,000 people saying he's fake news. Well, it might just be a dude, what did Trump say, a 400-pound guy on his bed or whatever in New Jersey, typing away on a computer, under like 11 different accounts, so that's one thing they have to keep in mind. The other thing is that this is the thing that frustrates me almost more than anything about what we're up against right now, and that is this bastardization of the term fake news. The term fake news obviously refers to these bogus stories that were planted in places like Facebook and so on during the 2016 campaign. Like Pizzagate, and now it's QAnon. Have you heard about this QAnon?
Yes.
I go to these Trump rallies now, and there are people who have Q T-shirts. Who is Q? What is Q? And all this. And I think to myself, I said, my goodness, we've now leapt past the point of tearing down the news media and calling them fake news to creating a new universe, an alternate reality for people. This is a whole other universe where people are now living, and they've been convinced that there's this Q thing. That's my water bottle cap. There's this whole Q thing going on, and the thing that just makes me depressed and just sad about this country. Like, my God, how are we going to pull these people out of this abyss that they've thrown themselves into, where they think this stuff is real and this stuff is reality? Those folks, if I were to offer them some advice, would be, please, for Pete's sake, talk to your parents, talk to your grandparents, learn some history, look what happened during the build-up to World War II, understand what happens to societies where the truth is destroyed, where the press is under attack, where the government tries to tell you what the truth is, and where the government tries to create an alternate reality. And find out what happens to those societies. Those societies end up going down the drain. Look what happened with Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist who was killed at that consulate in Turkey. The Saudi government initially said he walked out of that consulate. Then Trump comes out and talks to the press and says, rogue killers. There were rogue killers that killed. I talked to the king, and rogue killers killed Jamal Khashoggi. And then we find out it was the Saudis. It was operatives working for the kingdom. And that's what happens, and I'm going to talk about this later tonight, so hashtag spoiler alert. That's what happens when the government is in control of the information.
So if you could for a moment speak to our journalism students, to our San Jose State students, what should we know before we enter the field, and what is the biggest advice that you can give us?
And we will need this answer quick because we only have like 5 minutes left. We're running out of time, so we'll ask you as much as we can.
Yeah. I mean, you just have to stay strong at this point. You have to be committed to doing the right thing, telling the truth, being receptive to constructive criticism from your editors, from the possible mentors that you'll meet along the way. Because I mean, I had so many great ones along the way during my upbringing in this business. Be open-minded is the best piece of advice.
Yeah. And we have touched on some doom and gloom stuff because obviously your work is so intense in the White House press corps. Leave us on something positive. Like,
What do you like to do for fun?
Yeah.
What do I like to do for fun? What's that? No, I'm just kidding.
It's certainly not dinner with Sarah Sanders.
No, I don't think that's in the cards, unfortunately. I am a big beach bum. I love going to the beach. I'm just crazy about going to the beach. And if I can sit in a beach chair with a beer and watch the waves hit the shore, that to me is my idea of heaven.
Wow.
You know, that I love. I mean, I run every day now. I run about 3 to 5 miles a day, just because I'm so full of like, you know, adrenaline and stress and so on. It's kind of a stress-burning exercise. I guess that's kind of a release. I don't know. I guess that's fun. I suppose it's fun. I occasionally enjoy, you know, the occasional cocktail, beer, glass of wine with friends. You know, these days it's really about like having those moments of peace and serenity where you can have dinner with friends.
Absolutely.
Or I can be with my kids and go to a basketball game and like just regular stuff like mowing the grass. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff to me, gosh, it sounds so depressing now. I mean, I couldn't even be uplifting about not being depressing. No, you know, these days it's just about finding those moments of serenity, and I hope people in this environment right now, this supercharged environment, are still finding their moments of serenity. You know, maybe binge watch 5 shows instead of 6 shows.
Stranger Things?
Yeah, exactly, Stranger Things. You know, maybe binge watch a little less, go outside and walk around a little bit more. You know, I think that's the way to go.
I know earlier you were telling us after this you're heading up to Saratoga tomorrow. What are you doing after that next week? Sonoma.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Once you fly out of here, what's your schedule looking like? What are you working on?
The next couple of weeks are going to be super crazy. We've got the midterms coming up. Speaking of binge watching less, you should binge watch less and vote. I'm not saying who to vote for, I'm just saying vote. Let your voices be heard. You guys are well aware of the fact that millennials, and I try to be one of the biggest defenders of millennials, because I remember as a Generation Xer, because I remember Generation X, we had Nirvana and Pearl Jam, we were slackers, we had flannel shirts, we had baggy pants and construction boots, and we were like the slackers back then. You know, we had the baby boomers who were like, oh, this is the worst generation ever, and so on. And so I kind of get a chuckle when people go off on millennials and treat you guys like you guys are like this plague or something on the face of the earth. I think you guys are the hope for this country. You guys are the ones who are going to make this country a better place. And but you have to get your butts off of those sofas and put down the Netflix and the Hulu and the Instagram and everything else. I sound like an old person right now. The Instagram and the Twitter and the Google. And you got to, I challenge every millennial in this country to vote. And if every millennial in this country votes, you will see a tidal wave in this country like you've never seen before. And you will have so many people in this country saying, whoa, these guys mean business. I think that would be, if anything I would like to see, if I could have a wish, that would be my wish heading into the midterms, would be to see not a blue wave or a red wave, but a millennial wave. I'd love to see that.
Mr. Acosta?
Yes.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Is that whole thing on video? Oh my God. Oh. Just the last part.
Special thanks to the School of Mass Communications and Journalism. Thank you guys so much for coming.
And thank you again, Senior White House. Yes, White House.
These guys, I mean, they both get A's. Where are the professors? These guys
have our
are A's.
messages. We do have our
You do?
messages.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, good.
Thank you guys.
Extra credit.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
I recorded some of it.
Have you seen the video? I'm going to put online afterwards. Online where?